Hello, guys. Welcome to the process. Today we have Leslie Kronstedt here and my one and only main dog co-host, Alessandra Nicholson.
Yes.
I'm Sterile MD. Thank you for joining the show tonight, and we have some good information to you, Alessandra.
Hello, everybody. Good Wednesday. I hope everybody's staying dry out there. Tonight we have Leslie Kronstedt with us, a great friend of the show, and we're going to talk about legislation.
Before we get going, let's go. Welcome, Leslie. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me tonight.
You are very welcome. You are very welcome. So tell
Definitely. Go ahead.
Yeah, so Leslie, tell us a little bit about what you're here to talk to us about.
So, I'm going to talk to you guys tonight about legislation, specifically about um, sterile processing certification legislation.
And I'm really, really excited to bring this topic, especially because we did see recently an update from Isham's advocacy group to say that they recently hired a lobbyist to add sterile processing to the hazard pay bill that's moving through the federal channels at this time. So we thought it'd be a great opportunity for us to talk to a subject matter expert like Leslie Kronstedt and just get a deeper understanding of what is legislation? What does this have to do with sterile processing? Why does it matter? And even for the folks that are outside of our industry, who are we and why should they care about this? So thank you again, Leslie, for joining us to talk about this.
Oh, absolutely. So sterile processing professionals, who are they and why do they matter? Sterile processing professionals are performing decontamination and preparation, sterilization and distribution of surgical instruments and medical equipment at the surgery center, utilizing infection control and safety procedures practices during all phases of that process. So, what interested me in the sterile processing legislation was the fact that I didn't really know a whole lot about it. It interested me. I wanted to know what they were doing. And so I kind of took a deep dive into the world of it and I just got hooked into it. I was like, this is amazing. I want to know why it's taking so long. And
Why?
once I got into it, I was like, no wonder this is taking so long. And I just wanted to make other people aware of why it's taking so long. Once I realized why it was taking so long and the process behind our government, it all just became clear to me.
And we so appreciate that. That's really what the nuts and bolts is going to be about today. We wanted to take a look at the process. We hear technicians complaining all the time about how long this is taking, or it's only a few states, and not having that deeper understanding of what's going on in the background. And like you said, guys, I met with Leslie yesterday, and once she got to going about all the different houses, all the different subcommittees, I was like, no wonder this is taking as long as it's taking.
Oh, Leslie, thank you for so much for bringing this information. I would have no idea where to start, what's important, what's not important. So I really appreciate you coming on and share this information. So thank you so much.
So, Leslie, you said that part of the CS responsibilities are essentially infection control. They have to clean, they have to render these items safe to touch, and then sterilize them so that they're terminally sterile for their patients. So, is this something that the industry is very good at, or do they have consistent quality benchmarking, or is this something that is a little bit problematic and maybe requires some additional attention?
Well, unfortunately, there has been a history of some issues within our industry where certain bioburden has been left on instrumentation. It has come to the public's attention that bioburden has been left on surgical instruments that has put patients at serious risk of infection. Um, and when that does happen, it's where the bioburden is left on the instruments and used during the surgery, it's it can lead to infection of the patient and also could lead to death. So that's why this has come to our patients in our um, as a consumer of healthcare. It's come to their attention, and that's why this is coming up to legislators to as a problem. So as a government, government, what they do is they look for a problem, and what they want to do is take that problem and they want to solve it by creating laws. So what they do is they say,
Right?
okay,
Try to keep it easy, simple,
yep,
put it in black and white, and then everybody doesn't have to think about it.
exactly.
So, in terms of that, who's the law focusing on? The sterile processing department or the operating room, or the totality of the whole situation?
So with this law, it would be looking at specifically sterile processing technicians. So it would be looking at sterile processing technicians to get certification.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Hmm.
And then I heard
Interesting.
you use the term bioburden often, but especially since we want to keep this conversation to where lay people can join in so that we can get their support. What exactly is bioburden?
So bioburden would be like bloodborne pathogens. So any type of blood that's left on an instrumentation. So when
And
the
that,
instrument comes down from surgery, it generally has blood from the patient on it. And then we are tasked with cleaning that off in decontamination and getting it clean again, where it moves to prep and pack. So we inspect it, and then we expect we inspect it using infection control and safety practices, and then we get that instrument ready for sterilization. And now there's a lot of different standards that we use, like instructions for use, in order to ensure that we're following different metrics.
right, right. I can't, especially, I'm trying to put my hat on of thinking outside of SPD, but there are so many IFUs, right? We have the IFUs for the instruments, and you guys can think about this like going to IKEA and getting your dresser. It's going to come with instructions. And so for us, each part of that, the dresser, the screwdriver, anything that comes along with it is going to have its own separate instructions for use that we need to correlate together and make sure that we get the product out in the end per whatever that manufacturer has determined. So it can definitely be labor intensive, and at times the ball can be dropped, and then we see things happen like these surgical site infections. So can you talk to us a little bit about surgical site infections?
Sure. So surgical site infection is an infection that occurs after surgery in part of the body where the surgery took place. So surgical site infection can sometimes be superficial, involving just the skin, or it could be a surgical site infection where it's more serious and it can involve tissues under the skin, including organs or implanted materials. So Loyal University Health System reports as many as 300,000 patients per year acquire surgical site infections in the United States, making it the most common and costly of all healthcare-acquired infections. Um, Additionally, 20% of all hospital-acquired infections are surgical site infections. And then it's really expensive for the industry to have these surgical site infections. The estimated annual cost is anywhere estimated to be from 3.5 billion up to $10 billion a year, and it increases the average hospital length of stay for a patient by up to 9.9 to 10 days longer than they should have been in the hospital for.
Hmm.
Wow, 9
Interesting.
to 10 days longer than they were planning.
And those numbers are really huge in terms of SSIs. But I just wanted to go back a little bit on what you said about bioburden and decontamination process, and also piggybacking on what Alessandra said on IFUs. Most IFUs state that the cleaning begins at the point of use. So, so my question leads into why is it this legislation only focusing on sterile processing? Shouldn't the operating room be incorporated in that too?
Well, I agree that the operating room is required to start at the point of use. they have their own certification as well for the Association of Surgical Technologists. They have certification for them as well.
Mm,
But the ISHM, which is the International Association of Healthcare Central Service Material Management, is looking to get certification specifically for sterile processing technicians, which is why we're
mm.
focusing just on sterile processing technicians.
Okay. All right. I totally understand.
And you guys, if you haven't heard about those, I would definitely encourage you to check out the AST standards, the Association of Surgical Technologists, just to kind of give yourself some background about your partners' rules and regulations as well.
Mm.
So, Leslie, we've talked about who CS is and why they matter, and some of the issues that come up around them. Do we ever see, we talk a lot within the industry that nobody knows what we're doing, but do we ever see this spill out into the news?
Yes, unfortunately, it seems to be that when they do hear about us, it's usually the bad things that they do
Mm.
hear about, which seems to be very common in any industry. When they do hear about somebody, it's usually the bad things. For example, in 2016, a medical center in Detroit had a few facilities that was investigated by the state of Michigan, and it was introduced to the public just what kind of risks that do occur. There was specifically a number of surgeries that had to be canceled due to um, continuing issues where bioburden or blood was being found on instruments that were not cleaned properly. In one of the cases, the surgery of a 7-month-old pediatric patient undergoing a cardiac procedure had to be canceled due to a dirty suction that was found on the sterile field at the time.
Thank God you said canceled and not that they found it during the case. Deannard, in all of your experience in sterile processing, have you ever found bioburden on the clean side?
I have, unfortunately, found Bioburden on the clean side. As we all know, no process is perfect. So every now and then, a suction, even a faucet may have some bioburden in the serrations. So there is always a possibility that the cleaning process wasn't effective enough. The IFUs weren't followed, and sometimes the IFU has been followed, but then the bioburden is so stubborn it doesn't come off. So then again, you may have to take extra steps. Even certain instrumentation where sonification is not in the IFU, you may have to sonic that piece of instrumentation, just because of the complexity, the time it was, the time that instrument rolled out. Maybe sonification wasn't that present in the industry, so you may have to take other steps. You may have to soak for longer periods, even if the IFU doesn't say to soak for half an hour. You may have to um, have to perform extended soaks with certain instruments. So bioburden does end up on the clean side, and it all depends to the point of use cleaning, how long that instrument um, was um, was sitting with blood or bioburden on there, and also sitting in the room, because sometimes you have 4, 5, 6 hour cases. That instrument could have been used to open and sat there for the duration of the case, and came down at the end of the case, but in all actuality, it's been sitting there for hours. So you
Hours.
definitely have to factor that in.
Hours. And I heard so many different system issues, but do you feel like any of it is the level of competence of the person that's cleaning?
That's definitely a factor. The level of competence is also competence, which is kind of goes hand in hand with education. But then you can provide all the education if that the technician or the person receiving that education does not understand, or that education isn't maintained, based on, let's say you change your enzymatic detergent, you get a new washer, you have new brushes, you have the whole new sink or decontamination setup. Based on your previous training, that process may not work in the in the present day. So you have to factor all those things in. Your enzymatic temperatures may change versus the temperature of the water. You may have to soak an instrument longer, or even less time. So you have to factor all that in terms of having a good result in the end. So
Man, I mean, we do it, and even when you say it, it still sounds like a lot. you know, so
yeah.
there's so many factors that we have to think about, and it's all happening simultaneously. So I gotta ask Leslie, how do you feel like certification is going to remedy this issue? How is certification going to make it so that all of these factors that Deannard just mentioned don't actually impact the patient?
Um, the jobs of sterile processing technicians are exhausting, both mentally and physically, and the work they perform is critical to surgical outcomes. And honestly, surgery begins in sterile processing, and the best outcomes require knowledgeable, competent technicians. And we live in an ever-changing world, so medical advances with the latest technology creates a need for continuing education and knowledgeable technicians. So having that certification is just really critical for our technicians to be up with the latest technology that's ever changing.
Definitely. And I mean, you're dropping so much knowledge so fast. I wish we had time to drop a bomb, but I definitely want to drive home. Surgery starts in sterile processing. So, for all of my patients that are watching, surgeons, nurses, ASTs, surgery starts in sterile processing. And definitely for my SPD techs, definitely need you to hold and understand that we always refer back to point of use, but point of use actually takes place after you do your job, right? So it starts with us.
hmm And then I believe also a great point, Alessandra. Point of use cleaning, uh, sterile processing also needs to be informed if point of use cleaning isn't done. So
Mm-hmm.
expecting the scope to be flushed out before it comes down if your department does endoscopy processing, or expecting certain instruments to be lumens to be cleaned. Sometimes you get Steinman pins in lumens stuck. So you have to know where to start cleaning and how to clean if the point of use cleaning isn't done, so you could effectively clean that instrument. So you may not have to start with the soaking, you may have to start with inspecting to see whether there's a K wire in there or not. So
Sure.
simply just washing down and soaking might not be the best way to start. You may have to check all your lumens to see whether you have K wires, that gross soil or bone is in there. Because if you're soaking a piece of bone, it's not gonna melt away. It's gonna it's gonna stay there. The enzymatic might do a little something, change the color from red to white, but that piece of bone is gonna stay there. So you're
Evidence.
basically a half an hour soaking time is irrelevant because the bone is stuck in there. So you may
Sure.
have to do a whole pre-inspection to say before you start actually cleaning.
100%. It's definitely been an interesting experience to be able to see a piece of bone actually cleaned. I mean, what that looks like when all tissue and all the blood has been removed. But if I'm getting that on the assembly side, then yeah, we had a problem. And I know point of use factors into it, but also within our decatams, wondering whether or not there's the same level of dedication, the same level of professionalism, the same level of knowledge. And we hear some technicians say that certification doesn't change that people get certified and they don't seem to really know anything. But on the flip side, we're having this conversation about legislation and saying that this is what we're offering as a remedy right now to be able to level the playing field by requiring everybody to have this experience and read this book. You either go through ISHM or go through CBSPD and get this basic understanding. So for Leslie, um, do you feel like that deeper understanding impacts their work at all?
Absolutely. I think that either going through CBSBD or going through ISHM and obtaining that certification ensures that sterile processing professionals meet critical department duties, that they learn safety, efficiency, and they learn that consistency um, to meet um, to meet those department duties by that shows that they possess those essential knowledge and skills that are necessary to meet those needs.
Awesome. And I heard you say maintaining and continuing education. So, are there certain requirements on them, or what do they have to do?
So to maintain certification, you have to meet a minimum number of hours prior to certification, and then between the two, either CBSPD or ISHM, you have to either maintain a certain number of continuing education hours, either annually or every 5 years. And throughout the process, it ensures that the professionals stay current on changing instrumentation, the technology, standards, and best practices. And this allows technicians to do their part in keeping their departments functioning correctly. Certification also puts in place and allows individuals to recognize recognition of their knowledge, skills, and the commitment to their industry as well.
Hmm. Very
I
interesting.
think it's so
So,
valuable, being able to walk out with your piece of paper. It makes you feel proud.
Yeah, it does.
so Leslie, I know this is a very involved process, but how would states requiring the certification affect SSIs moving forward?
So the states that require certification offer healthcare consumers knowledgeable technicians that are up to date on staying knowledgeable with their education. They receive education material from, for example, Isham sends out regular magazines, and then there's other sources regularly that get sent out to these technicians. Additionally, their medical facilities that they work for will maintain the compliance that their technicians are up to their education as well yearly.
Okay, so that's
Uh,
that's good to hear.
so
It's
it's
not just the technician, but the facility that's responsible.
Right.
so I know it's against an involved process. So the ownership is on the governing bodies for sterile processing, the management, and the technicians to basically clean up their act, basically.
Yep. So there's three different levels there. So you have the regulatory bodies. So you have Isham or CBSPD that's going to remind you that you need to maintain your certification. You have your facility that's going to be enforcing this, as well as your own personal responsibility to maintain your certification, and that's going to be state enforced.
Good
Hmm.
deal.
Hmm.
And for any of the
Interesting.
technicians watching right now, especially with everybody going through staffing and different pandemic related issues, I'd highly encourage you to turn in your recertification documents a little early this time around.
Yeah, and there's plenty of education going on right now.
Yes,
If you just look on social media, on your LinkedIn, on your Facebook, go to Asian websites, your vendor websites, there's plenty of education available so you could maintain your certification and also gain much needed education on areas you may not be focusing while in your 8 hour, 12-hour shift within your department.
definitely. So, do either one of you live in a state where this is already required?
Unfortunately, no, I do not.
How about you,
Yes.
Denard?
So Pennsylvania actually requires it. So I'm kind of 50-50 on it. I love the progress of requiring certifications. I don't like the fact that it's basically enforced strictly for sterile processing professionals. A nurse could come to your department and do the same thing you do, would not have to get a certification, would not have to ever read a book on sterile processing within 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So a doctor could come down and say, "Hey, put this in there, put that here," and they would never have to read a
That's
book on sterile
true.
processing. So that's the fact about of the matter.
Yeah.
So based on the hierarchy within most facilities, a nurse would definitely outrank a sterile processing technician or professional. A doctor would definitely. So, in my opinion, those persons definitely need to be educated also and not think that their previous education would dictate how a sterile processing department runs. That's
Whew.
just my 2 cents.
2 cents. I won't echo all my 2 cents because I know we have a couple of the process path episodes where you guys can go back and hear how we personally feel about this process. But I do like you said, I do like the progress right now. I think that helps. And something that something I learned prepping with Leslie yesterday was that we won't really see a requirement across the board until we get all 50 states, on board or in, online with this concept. So I'm curious, Leslie, how close are we? How many states are already requiring certification?
Right now, there's currently 5 states that require certifications. So that's New York, Connecticut, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Tennessee. ISHM is currently in the process of working on Florida, Colorado, and Massachusetts.
Awesome, awesome. I'm actually quite surprised to hear that Massachusetts and California weren't leading this conversation versus still being brought in.
And let me give some more sense. Let me give 5.5 cents there. So I believe hopefully someone from one of the regulatory bodies hearing this. Moving forward, since we have a blueprint of actually getting the certification mandated, that we maybe add some stricter um, processes in place in there so that we could build off of that. So at the end, when we get to maybe the 49th state, we at a point where we're a little more satisfied with the process.
Hmm.
So,
So having that original bill not look so similar to the
right.
50th bill.
Exactly. Add a little something else in there every time. Try and push for a little more every time.
Sprinkle
Not
something
sit,
else in there.
right. Bring a little something there. Make it a little tougher. Like said, well, Pennsylvania, we had this, but we're going to try and add a little something else. So you know what I mean. So by the end of that time, we could definitely piggyback off our progress and make it a little more strict. So.
Definitely.
Well, we want to try to make each state similar as much as
Mm-hmm.
possible because imagine being a technician that's traveling and you're going from one state to another, and each state has different regulations.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have to sit down and you have to figure out what the laws are, what you
Yes.
have to keep it track of, and then you go to another state after your 8 weeks, and then
Mm-hmm.
you have a whole new set of laws that you have to keep track of because
Come
each
on.
Yeah.
And
True.
it's I
True.
mean it's also one of the coolest things about the cert is that it's international. You can take it anywhere.
yeah, so it's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, your certification is international. It can be taken anywhere, but with the laws, each law is different. If they were
Mm-hmm.
all different in each state, we want
Mm-hmm.
to try to keep it as uniform as possible for our technicians.
Yeah, but I agree with you. I agree with you. For technicians, keep it uniformed, but
Yep.
it definitely needs to be more strict on those persons who aren't technicians
Hmm.
as to what they're allowed to do. You
Well,
could
maybe we
probably.
can get somebody on from Isham that can answer this question for us because it definitely it's come up in some of the conversations. Like I heard this, I think in a clubhouse space as well. Like why is this the case? But currently, that's the way the law reads. We'll drop the link to our past show where we actually went through and read the most current law and broke down who's allowed, who's not allowed, what you have to do to maintain it, and the big question that everybody was asking, which was whether or not it required additional pay. And for you all that are wondering, the answer is no. No, it does not. However, playing devil's advocate, I think it would be a lot more difficult for the team to get these laws passed if they were requiring the states to require additional pay.
Yeah,
True.
What do you think about
Very,
that, Leslie?
very
Do you
true.
think it would be harder or easier?
very difficult just to get them passed the way
All
that they
right.
are
So,
without adding additional pay.
wow, right? And they're
Yeah, because then you have the hospitals that are coming
it's
in.
tough, right?
Yep. Yeah, because then you have the hospitals that are coming in, and there's let's just say that they have a money talks.
Money
True.
talks,
True. True.
right? And nobody's gonna volunteer to pay more, unfortunately.
Here to pay more, and they I would imagine that our medical facilities do have some sway over our election processes.
Oh, absolutely. I'd imagine.
Yes,
So
yes.
we talked about how this would affect the text if the law was different in every state. But given that there's only, what do we say, 5 states um, that are currently, or no, 4, no, 5, sorry, 5 states that are currently requiring certification. Um, what does that mean for the rest of the technicians that are currently working in the field? Does it change anything for them?
No, currently no.
And
Oh,
then for
that
the it doesn't, wait,
that
that's
that's
not their state, huh?
Not their
mm,
state.
And
So,
mm.
so for the folks that are in those states, what did it change for them?
well, for the people that are in those states, they are mandated. They have laws that require them to have certification in their states in order to work. And the difference is that there are some um, some flexibility. So, say if you are an older worker and you are close to retirement and you've been in your job for a very long time and you're only a year or two from retirement and you've never gotten certification, you could be grandfathered in. So
Mm,
you don't have to get your certification. You could stay at your job where you are until you retire and you wouldn't have to get certification. However, if you go from a hospital setting to an ASC setting, then you might have to get certification because then all of a sudden you move to a different work job position.
Mm.
So then that grandfather clause would break.
right. Grandfather
So there's
clause would break.
built um, into these into these laws to protect people still and maintain their jobs.
And we do see in the job descriptions as well that they may typically give you a window of time. So
Yep.
you may get, a year or 2 years from the time that you're hired in order to acquire that certification as well. Although I will say we are seeing more and more facilities require it up front.
Yes, and even the states that do not have legislation that's mandating certification, a lot of the facilities are requiring it on their own.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And I do believe that's a loophole, kind of, sort of. I do appreciate my senior technicians for all the service that they have rendered over the years. But I definitely believe that's a loophole that could potentially cause a patient harm, although it helps the technician out. But if the education is not up to par and the initiative of those technicians to actually educate themselves isn't there, there might be some lapse in service to the patient. That's what I
Absolutely.
believe. So I know the nurses are all buttoned up in terms of salary. So what's the difference between, and I'm not sure because they're registered and then we're certified. I'm not sure of the difference. So Leslie, what's the difference between being registered and certified? Registered and certification. What's the difference between those two?
So the major difference between the two involves the administering authority. Certification is usually issued by a non-government agency,
Mm,
entity, or organization. For example, an association of nurses or a dentist board would be like they're registered with a license,
right.
whereas we are we're certified. So ISHM and CBSBT are both non-government organizations that are administered certifications for the sterile processing industry.
Wow. So I see a comment here, and I can't see the name, so I'm gonna. Is it Harry? Because I'm gonna assume it's Harry, especially because of
Most.
the comment. So the comment says infection rates are becoming more public. Oh, sorry, infection rates becoming more public will push legislation. Look what happened with just one Sharon Green Golden feature on the Today Show. More visibility is required. I couldn't agree more. More visibility is required. Anytime that we get patients involved and knowledgeable about what we do and how it impacts them, you they can move a needle much faster than we can.
Oh yeah, definitely. When there's a problem, there's
That's actually Sharon Combs. Sorry to interrupt you. That's Miss Combs there.
sure.
Oh, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi,
And
Sharon.
earlier, just give a shout out to Miss Sharon Combs, and also to give a special shout out also in the comments, Hank Balch.
Hey, Hank.
Thank, thank you for joining.
Good deal. Y'all forgive me. I can't. It just says Facebook user, and Harry usually is our number one Facebook user. Miss him tonight. All right. So Miss Sharon Green Golden was on the Today Show, huh?
Yeah, she was. Don't you remember that?
Oh no, sir.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Remember,
I,
I just met her this year. I just got doused with all this greatness this year. I feel bad that I've
oh,
missed
okay,
out on
okay.
so much.
Yeah, she was
Now I gotta go
all.
look up something else.
Yes, you have to go look it up. She
All
was
right.
very professional, had a little scrubs on, spoke very well of the
Oh
profession,
well,
and then
as she
and
does.
in her Sharon Green Golden voice, was telling it like it is. So it was very well said. I think
Telling
I
it
went
like it
for
is.
a couple conferences, and they aired her that portion too. So that was very good at that time when we had
That's
the endoscope
awesome.
reprocessing situation going on. So yeah, that was nice. That was nice.
Mm.
Look it up,
So she was
guys.
dropping that knowledge.
If you have no reference, and then you see Miss Green Golden on her view from the window, and you have no idea who she is or what she's done in the past, Google the Today Show, Sharon Green Golden, and you will see
Let me see
her
before.
interview on the show.
Awesome. Thank you. Something else awesome from her. If you guys didn't catch her on the process marathon, she was also just I don't even know how many bombs we dropped during her session. It was amazing. And if
Yeah.
you guys are CBSBD certified, we do have some CEUs that we can offer for those of you that tuned in for the marathon. So thank you.
Yes, we have. You want to say how many?
Absolutely. We have 12,
Ooh.
12
12
CEUs for
C's from
you.
CBSPD for the process marathon. So if you guys are interested, reach out to us and we will.
Ooh.
What's wrong?
So no, nothing wrong. But
Oh.
I saw Sharon Combs comment, and so before we move into the second half of our show, she said yes. And as an industry, we didn't rally behind her when she had the ear of the public. Now we are trying to regain that ear. I'm definitely sad to hear she didn't get the backup from the industry
Yeah.
at that time. But I absolutely agree with Sharon. We on our way back. We on our
and
way
then
back to all
and then
front runner news.
let me do
To
something
spread
we've
this message.
never done on the show. We never dropped a bomb on a comment. So
Come
that's our
on,
first comment bomb. So
there you
Miss
go.
Combs, you're the first.
It's probably good I didn't hear about it because you know my loud mouth. We would have had all the press we didn't need that day. All
Oh
right.
man.
So getting back into this conversation around legislation is so important. Um, what is the actual process for these laws to come in place and be regulated and on the books?
Well, okay, so the process is really complicated. So, as I said at the beginning, government creates laws based on a problem. In order for laws to be passed, there must be a solution. So, once the solution to the problem has been established, the solution then can be drafted into a bill. And the process to move a bill through the state Congress before the end of is to move the state. Okay, so the process is to move the bill through the state's Congress before the end of the congressional session is challenging.
Mm.
Each state has different time frames in which they have open session. So Florida, for example, only has 2 months of open session. So like if you watched Isham's virtual conference, um, Josephine, I can't say her last name,
Kalachi.
Kalachi, that's it. It um, explained that she was having to do a great deal of groundwork ahead of time to combat that short time frame in order to get as much done as she can ahead of time in order to work with that really short time frame. So each
Wow.
state is like a maze, and no two states are identical. So So to really explain it the best way I can, I'm going to kind of, each state governments are modeled behind our national government. So I'm going to explain it at this high level of our national government. So keep that in mind while I explain our national government level. So the state and the House representatives are organized into legislative committees and subcommittees that places bills on a particular subject matter into a committee. It can be placed into even smaller specific subcommittees for consideration and debate.
Mm.
And then most bills, about 90% of them, die in the committee or subcommittee where they're pigeonholed or they're simply forgot about and never discussed. So some bills are so complicated and touched upon so many areas by these subcommittees that it's required to be referred to all these different committees. And if for some, after all of this discussion, if the bill actually survives, the hearings are set up with all these various experts. The government officials and the lobbyists present their different points of views to the committee members.
Mm.
And then after the hearings, the bill is marked up or revised based on what they decide until the committee is ready to send it to the floor. So once it hits the floor, um, it is to the advantage of the committees to place it, the narrow down bills down to these subject matter experts.
Mm.
And then the um, once the bill has been approved, it moves to the other side of whoever. So it was like, say it was in the
Right.
House of Representatives, it flips to the other side and it goes to the Senate. And then
And am I
there's
understanding that the House would have its committees and subcommittees, and the Senate would have its own committees and subcommittees?
exactly, and then it goes to its floor debates, and then it would be introduced again. So it goes through these two different things, then it switches sides, and then it comes down where it would be presented to the members for voting, and then it would have to go through a majority vote to pass. And then once it gets to the very bottom of all that, then it has to be, once it gets approved in both sides of the houses, a conference committee is convened where both houses need to merge the two forms of the bills
Mm.
together, and then they have to say, okay, well, this is the form of the bill that we approved, and this is the form of the bill that we approved, and then they have to merge it into one bill together. And then
No
once
easy
that,
feat.
yeah, that's no easy feat at
No
all.
easy
You have
feat.
two different sides that see things kind of differently. So this leads to producing a slightly different bill than what was originally probably given to them.
Right.
So then once they get it down to this one bill, then the chief executive can sign it. So the chief executive would be on the high level, the president. The second level would be the governor. The third level would be your mayor in your city. So,
I
um,
can only imagine how challenging, because like I'm thinking about even just within surgery and SPD when we're trying to make policies together.
yep,
We have SPD has their version, OR has their version. Now we're trying to make this thing meet in the middle, and sometimes that can be a long and drawn out process just over language and verbiage alone.
absolutely. So if they can resolve the differences, the conference reports written, and then they both, and then it's given the to the state governor, who can either uh, they can immediately um, sign the law into the bill into a law, or they can veto it, and then they can explain why they rejected it.
Mm.
Um, or there's other options that they can do, but I'm not even going to explain that because they rarely ever.
And to your knowledge, has a SPD bill ever been vetoed?
um, yes, this was recently. I can't remember. Very recently, one of the states, I think it was Colorado this year. If it would have made it through Colorado this year, the governor said that if it would have made it to his desk, he would have vetoed it.
Hmm. I'll have to do some research and see if we can find out exactly why. It almost seems like a no-brainer to us, right?
Yeah,
That this would be a yes, a resounding yes. But as you mentioned, there are so many different, e-commerce, infection control, employee safety. So there's so many different committees and subcommittees that these things could be flowing through, and then getting the House and the Senate to agree, finally getting something onto the governor's desk is such a intense process, it makes it a lot easier to understand why we're at five, and also makes five such a huge number. That's astronomical as far as, being able to get this through. We've done this now in five different state legislators.
Yeah, and it takes a long time. It takes years for this to happen because it has to be reintroduced multiple times. Um, so it just, for when it finally does happen and they finally manage to get it signed into a bill, it is a huge, huge step, and it's something we're celebrating.
Definitely something worth celebrating. So I see a comment up here and says, "Is there any way to avoid the writers?" I'm not sure what that's referring to. Um, so maybe if you guys can give us just a little more context. I also see it's a marathon, not a sprint. Plus, Democrats and Republicans have to come together to craft an agreed final bill before it goes for signatures. Politicians try to throw riders on the bills. Ah, yes,
Oh, yes.
definitely that. Yes, thank you.
Yep. That's right. They tried to throw extra stuff into it. Um, and then, when it, that's from Sharon. Got it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So once it comes in, they're trying to throw extra things into the bill. And, we come back at it and we're like, okay, well, that's not what we wanted in our bill. And we have to come back and say, okay, like, we're not going to settle with this.
Yeah.
This is what we were looking for, and we're going to stand on our ground with this. This is what we were looking for.
So it's
So
definitely heavy
it's
on
a hardcore
negotiations.
call sometimes. Yeah.
So we talked about it at the beginning of the episode, but recently Isham announced that they've hired a lobbyist, McAllister and Quinn, to help represent our interest in being added to a hazard pay bill, which is totally separate from this conversation about certifications being required at the state level. However, I have to imagine that they're also working with lobbyists in that experience as well. So for the technicians, when they read this, what should that mean to them? How does a lobbyist being added to these conversations help?
Well, the lobbyists are really a big step up to help us because advocacy is essential to promote the sterile processing profession, to support legislation. It advances the public's policy issues that reflect the standards and principles of patient safety. Um, it is simply to it is simple to attribute lack of time as a barrier to a significant member participation advocacy. Hiring a professional lobbyist can provide professional, goal driven results and coordinated volunteer efforts. Lobbyists are well versed in handling multiple issues. They do not need to be familiar with your issue. They
Mm,
are accustomed to researching new perspectives. They respect the organization's expertise and they're willing to learn. Their willingness to learn make lobbyist selection critical.
mm.
So when
So
Isham needs to hire a lobbyist, Josephine, Isham's government affairs director, will ask chapters to help with hiring a lobbyist with the expenses and stuff. So,
awesome.
but in some cases, chapters are really successful in reaching out to their legislators with grassroots efforts.
That's awesome. So I'm glad you mentioned that. Is there a way for the general technician, the issue members, to be more involved in this process?
So Josephine often sends out emails asking technicians to be involved, to send out letters to their legislatures. So she recently sent out a thing for advocacy. She does this every year for Sterile Processing Week, and in the coming week, she's going to have another thing coming up for this hazard pay specifically.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
so with the hazard pay, that's gonna have she's gonna be sending out emails to every sterile processing technician, probably in Isham's database, in a grassroots effort to contact legislators regarding being added to this federal case for hazard pay for sterile processing technicians for their work
Mm-hmm.
during the COVID-19 um, cases during from 2020 to 2021. So without your help in reaching out to legislators, your voice is not going to be heard for this all important bill for retro pay. Um, and then to answer this, is there a way to avoid the writers? I think having these lobbyists is really important to avoid the writers because they come in and they provide a lot of this information to the
Mm.
legislators. They provide our take and why it's so important to stick with what we're asking for. Um, you know,
Rather than amending the language.
yep, why not to amend the language? We have a lot of different regulatory bodies that we look to for guidance. So that's other things that lobbyists can definitely put in their ears and say, hey, we have these different regulatory bodies that we can look at.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, thank you for that piece. What I took from the writer question from Ms. Combs was adding extra provisions to a bill, um, so that that would make it tougher. So let's say we would want a bill saying we want certification for sterile processing technicians. Another legislator would come in and say, well, if you want certification for technicians, let's bring on surge techs too, or let's bring on EVS too, or let's group it with something else.
Yeah.
So I think that's definitely, I've heard that many times on the news,
Yeah.
where bills are lumped into, where we have a gas tax, but we want to cut 1 million trees in Alaska. So it's kind of like like you're gonna have to give something to get something.
Yeah.
Um, or you want the oil pipe in, Alaska, but you want safe emission standards for vehicles in 2 years. So it's always a catch-22 when you have different
Mm.
conflicts like that, to pass a bill, and then at the end of the day, you'd hear, oh, this person voted for cutting trees in Alaska, but what they really wanted to was just, have more electric vehicles. So then they would get dinged on that one vote, which created a bunch of different issues. But anyway, I digress. So years ago, when I started attending seminars, I heard Joe Clarchy speaking about, she went to, I believe at the time it was probably Pennsylvania or New York, and she spoke to a legislator, and her husband was actually a surgeon, and she stated that she thought all surgical instruments were disposable. So, saying that, how educated are our legislators on SSIs, on sterile processing, on what they are actually voting on?
so a lot of times the legislators are not very educated on what they're voting on specifically. They didn't go to school for what we're what we went to school for. So
Right.
legislators will look to regulatory bodies for guidance. So a lot of times they'll look towards our Association of Advancement of Medical Instrumentation, such as AMI, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission revolves around developing, managing, and using safe and effective health technology. They also will look at the American National Standard Institution, ANSI, who is responsible for providing standards and recommended practices that are then considered American national standards.
Awesome. And
Hmm.
definitely, for my techs, if you haven't, because we hear about Amy all the time, but if you haven't taken a look at the ANSI standards, go ahead and take a peruse. You might be surprised what you find. You might be
Hmm.
surprised what you can use. And I think it is important for us to understand how other groups view this work so that we can be speaking the same language. I think sometimes with SPD, we kind of get lost in the sauce because we're seen as the unprofessional, side. But there's so much technical knowledge involved in what we do. So that's definitely not the case. But maybe, being able to polish it and speak to it. And one of the things that you mentioned was about the technicians calling and contacting their local legislators. I wonder if that's something that the process can help with. We've done this marathon, but maybe we can do, like those old PBS phone tree specials where we're getting everybody involved, giving a call to their local legislators and talking about not just the wonderful things that we do in SPD, but the reasons why we need support in order to be able to provide the service that we do.
Josephine makes it so simple right on the ISHM web page under Advocacy. She has it set up so all you have to do is enter your information. She has everything pre-written out to your legislator with all the information of what needs to be said to them, to tell them of what we do, why we do it, and what needs to be said of why we need them to listen to our voice. And all they have to do is just hit that send button.
Keeping it simple. The process is easy. So I did drop the link for that advocacy page on the process live link, and I will hand it over to Deannard as well so that we can post it on the YouTube
The other nice thing is that she selects five
channel
people
as
out of
well. I had
that.
a
So anybody that does that up until the end of this month will be entered into for a free trip to Isham.
Say it again.
So anybody that submits that advocacy email for
Mm-hmm.
her grassroots effort will be entered in for a free trip to an Isham conference.
Free trip to Isham Con. That's all I was waiting for.
right.
Free trip to Isham
You
conference.
should have led with that.
So
It's
guys,
only
send.
five.
So all you have to do is click on that email and respond. It's an easy process. I've done it before. It's very,
Yeah,
very easy. And you could win
very.
a free, come on, free trip.
One other thing that I do want to highlight for my technicians and for my outside members, I don't want to call y'all all patients watching because you may not have have had surgery. Go ahead and take a look at that advocacy page so that you where your state regions. And then there's actually a committee group of representatives that is working on this. So each region has a state or has a representative for that region. So I know a lot of us are probably familiar with Damian Berg because we see him hopping all over the place to work on these efforts. He actually represents Region 4, but there's 5 of them to check out. So make sure you click on the link.
Be sure to click on the link. Links will be in the description. And also, Alessandra, I'll let you go ahead. I won't stop it. I'll save my piece till the end of the show.
Well, look, we are nearly there. I appreciate Sharon. We'll definitely reach out to you. The process is happy to collaborate. We know that Knowledge Nonsense is all about sharing information with technicians and with healthcare professionals. So we appreciate the extension.
So just let me give Sharon, thank you. Appreciate that. Give all a round of applause. We do the bombs also. So, Leslie, thank you so much. A wealth of knowledge. We definitely want to have you on again.
We
Um,
always love having
all
Leslie
we
on
all
the
Leslie
show.
is part of the crew.
Yes.
She's my sister from another mother. So definitely having Leslie on. So we talk all the time. So this is not the first time. That's why, like, we don't really talk much on here, but yeah, we talk basically every day. So I'm pretty involved in understand what Leslie is doing, and she's
Yes.
bringing value to the industry definitely.
Absolutely. And I do want to piggyback on that. If you're not following Leslie Kronstedt on LinkedIn, you're doing yourself a disservice.
You
So
are.
go over and find her on LinkedIn, follow her page. She puts out some exceptional content out practically daily. And it's not just, little snippets, it's deep thought that goes into it and a lot of research, which I absolutely appreciate. I know as a manager, a lot of times when I bring new information to my techs, the first thing they ask me is where did I get that from? And when I look at Leslie's post, now I can find not only her information, but a lot of times references. And she is an exceptional person. So definitely reach out, add her, follow her on LinkedIn.
Yeah, Leslie.
Thank you so much for having me, you guys. I'm always a shy person, so you know, it's meant to be
uh,
fun. But you know me, I don't do anything without a lot of details. So
Yes,
with me.
That's good. That's good.
and we
We really
appreciate it.
appreciate it. And guys, thank you so much for joining. Also, guys, the process show is on TuneIn Radio. If you
Yay.
have the TuneIn Radio app, You could type in the process. You can listen anywhere in the world. I know we have other apps also, but TuneIn Radio is mainly used, from my understanding, is more international. So persons from the Caribbean, Africa, those persons use this a lot, especially to get radio stations and other information from the US. So you guys could listen to the process also.
Yes.
Um, if you're on vacation,
Right
or
wherever you
if
are.
you are at work, you can listen to the process. So download the TuneIn Radio app and just type in the process, and you'll be able to listen to our previous episodes. So thank you guys so much. I should have had some music playing in the background before I said that. But thank you guys so much for joining. Alessandra, thank you so much. Great co-host. We
Thank
have
you.
another guest on next week. Oh,
I'm
guys,
excited.
next week will be another special show. Thank you, Leslie, so much for joining. And guys, we'll see you in the next show. Hold on. Let me get my outro on there. So thank you, guys. We'll see you in the next show. Peace.